Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event brought to you by the Center for Women's Leadership at the Forbes School of Business and Technology at University of Arizona Global Campus. This is our second event this week as we celebrate International Women's Day. And you guys are in for a huge treat today as we have a very unique panel discussion. It is going to be led by our special guest and moderator, Knorr Bahal. She is the founder and CEO of MindHatch, where she uses her expertise in human-centered design, organizational improv, facilitation, and diversity, equity, and inclusion to help organizations create the conditions for innovation and creativity to thrive. She's also the author of I Quit, the life-affirming joy of giving up, which aims to reframe and destigmatize quitting by sharing stories from real people and how they summon the courage to quit things in their lives. And she has brought some incredible guests with her today that are going to serve as her panelists. And so without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Knorr Bahal.
I'm Randy. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you all this week to help celebrate in a small way International Women's Day. I'm extra pleased to have with me my panelists who I know pretty well because the four other women who are here with me today, each of their quitting stories were featured in my book, I Quit, the Life-Affirming Joy of Giving Up. All of their stories comprise the whole section on quitting jobs and careers specifically. So we're going to dig deep into quitting, some of their own thoughts and value systems and thoughts on quitting, and hoping to have a really engaging conversation. I'm sure we will for the next hour. But allow me to introduce who we have here today. And I'm going to read. First, we have Beth Schill. Beth is a senior manager of employee relations and industry advising at the Colleague Career Education Center at Georgetown University. Beth spent over a decade working in federal human capital policy work, first at CEB, then at Deloitte Consulting's federal practice, and last as a research manager at the Partnership for Public Service. Beth's story in the book is titled, I Quit My High-Powered Career to Save My Health. Yvonne Atour is founder of Thriving Physicians and Thriving Idealist, where she coaches mission-driven physicians and other helping professionals who desire to serve and lead sustainably and thrive in their personal and professional lives while making their positive impact in the world without succumbing to disillusionment, moral injury, compassion fatigue, or burnout. Yvonne's story in the book is titled, I Quit Being a Doctor. Kathy Klotz-Guest is an author, professional speaker, and comedian on a mission to reimagine the story of humor in our lives and at work. As founder of Keeping It Human, she helps progressive leaders and companies use humor and improv principles to be bolder in shaping culture, communications, and storytelling for bigger influence, impact, and change. Kathy's story in the book is titled, I Quit Silicon Valley. Christina Saran is regional director for Stuhler Incorporated and has primarily made her career in the jewelry industry, except for the years she spent as a flying trapeze artist for acts such as Ringling Brothers and Cirque du Soleil. Christina's story in the book is titled, I Quit the Circus. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to have these four faces in one place and for you all to know each other as well. I want to start off by asking each of our panelists, please, in any order, what were you told about quitting when you were younger? Actually, let's just start with Kathy. Kathy, you want to go ahead and start. What were you told about quitting when you were younger? Define younger however you like.
My younger self. So I grew up in a very, you could do anything kind of household, but my dad was a Marine. So you did quit your crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Quitting was not an option. And, and I'm sure big things, if you quit, my dad would have been cool with. But the discussion in my house was always try harder, find a way around the mountain, find a way around the obstacle. And, my father, who was a Vietnam War vet, he was the guy, he was the poster guy for tough times and getting around obstacles. And so quitting was really sort of it had the stigma. It had a little bit of the stigma in my house. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else have a similar experience that want to chime in?
I think you have a pretty hard time with me in our interviews because I always just thought quitting was giving up. Quitting was in a negative manner until the end of in our time together when I finally said I did quit. So
Yeah,
I think it's always had some kind of negative connotation.
Yeah. And Christina, so sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing your audio on our end. But we'll give you a second and see if maybe that'll get better as we go on. But Yvonne, what did you grow up thinking about quitting?
I was laughing because I was laughing at Kathy's story because, like, for me, I was born in the UK and I was raised in Nigeria. So, like, I come from an immigrant family, and I didn't even know what quitting was. That was not ever a part of the lingo, or even like it was never in my consciousness that you could quit. So it wasn't even like don't quit. It was just it didn't exist. You just find a way to make things happen. You just that immigrant grit that by any means necessary. So I just coming up, was never a part of my consciousness. So, and which was probably why I went until I almost crashed and burned, because I didn't know of any other way to exist other than just keep going. And when you're the one who's always achieving, or when you're around people who are constantly achieving, right? And immigrants are known for that. That's just what you do. You just keep going.
Yeah, so it's interesting. For you, it wasn't even in the universe of options to even be discussed as a thing you don't do. It just wasn't even spoken. It was like a unicorn. It doesn't exist. Why are we talking about it? Great. Okay, yeah. And Beth, how about you? What were your earliest conceptions of quitting?
Yeah, it was kind of similar. I grew up in the Metro Detroit area in a blue collar household. So it was very much like you have to do a lot of hard work. I remember distinctly a coach of mine saying, like, you're good, but every day you work your butt off to make yourself better. And so it wasn't until, and this kind of relates a little bit to what I'll get into, but like in high school was when I started having some health problems. And then the story changed a little bit. And my mom was a high school counselor, and we started to have these conversations about like how to, I guess, exit things gracefully. So it wasn't like a hard quit, but learning, like, I was faced with some decisions earlier on than I thought, and trying to come to grips with that for myself and my family was a little bit different, and it's still something that is part of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was something that I learned in writing the book and collecting these stories, that the stigma and the shame around quitting transcends culture, transcends class, transcends gender, ethnicity, everything. Seemingly, no one is safe from the negative attitudes toward quitting. I'd like to next ask each of you, when did you first start to rethink quitting? Let's start with Christina. Let's see. Hopefully your audio is working better. When did you first start to rethink quitting?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that seems to be better. Yeah.
Okay, good. It was definitely in the conversations with you.
Yeah, that's right.
I think prior to that, it just still was just not an option. I never had that outlook that it was okay, or it led me to where I am today. So it was definitely influenced by you. So thank you for that.
No problem. Yeah, for context, in Christina's story about quitting the circus, up until the very end of our conversation, she kept using euphemisms like retire, left behind, transitioned out of. And I think it's pretty telling, because a lot of us do use verbal dodges because the word quit is so stigmatized. So, Christina turned around by the end. So, who would like to share next about, when you first started to rethink quitting and what caused that?
I'll go ahead. So like I said, it kind of started in high school when I had a seizure, and I immediately had to kind of make some decisions, and it was high school level decisions. So it's like, what of the cajillion activities am I a part of? Do I not really like anyway? And that I can just kind of let slide. That isn't going to hurt my college admission chances. So there were those conversations, but there was also at the same time this thing of like, well, I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm not going to let this health issue define me. I want to make it seem that if you look at me, you would have no idea that anything's wrong. And I'm going to keep going. And so it wasn't until I had my second seizure, which was when I was working at the Deloitte at a consulting firm, that all of a sudden was like, okay, now something's got to change. Now I've been officially diagnosed with epilepsy, and my doctors are telling me if I don't make some changes, my life could be in danger. So it was that point when I really started to have to think about, in my case, it was saying no to things. And then, eventually led to quitting my role.
Yeah. Yvonne and Kathy, when did you first start to rethink your earlier conception?
This is Yvonne. Yeah. So for me, it was, when I saw the attending physicians I was kind of like seeing my future self in them, right? There, you come in like, I don't know about others, but like growing up, I just wanted to make a difference in the world, and medicine seemed like the way to do it, because then I could be this, change the world and heal people and blah, 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 blah. And I had this idealized version of how I thought my life would be. And, my heroes were Albert Schweitzer and, like all these people who were medical missionaries, right? And Oprah. And so it's like very like these grand ideas of helping lots of people, changing the world. And but then I'm going to the hospital and I'm seeing the attending physicians. This was during my residency training, and even during med school. And the attending physicians are unhappy and they're complaining all the time. And I'm a pretty vibrant, happy, kind of positive kind of person. And I was like, that's my future. So like being able to see my future self in these people scared the crap out of me. I was like, I think that I will probably die inside if I continued on this path, at least just the way medicine was being practiced, the way I saw it. So that was when I started thinking, oh, okay, this is not what I signed up for. This is not living in alignment with the ideals that I hold dear. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started thinking about it.
Yeah. Kathy, how about you?
Yeah, I really relate to that. I think for me, I always felt like, remember Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other. That's me. It's me. Surprise. I felt that way for a long, long time, but I always felt like, work harder, try to fit in, all that other stuff, because that's what we did. And I can remember at one point in my career talking to older women and how armored up they were and all the garbage that they had to deal with. And I felt it. And I remember thinking, that calcification of my joy and myself and all of that stuff, I'm feeling it. It's not a matter of working harder, because I'm working as hard as a person can work, but I can't, systemic change isn't going to happen because I'm working harder. It's like the logic is like, no, this isn't working. And I remember being really unhappy. And I think so much of my background and my mentality and my outlook was shaped by improv, and kind of where you'll appreciate this, improv and comedy, because I found joy on a stage and I was like, why can't I do it here? And I realized that Yes and was really foundational for me, because it helped me realize that I wasn't saying no and that I couldn't do it. It was that I was choosing myself, that I was choosing my joy and my happiness. And that was a big kind of mind shift for me. So it started, comedy really changed, I think, my DNA and how I looked at choosing myself, not quitting, but saying to myself, all right, you could end up like this. And that you're meant for something else. So it's okay to opt out and choose yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I was rereading each of your stories last night, even though I promised myself I would never read my book because it terrifies me, much like I never watch my own improv shows. But Kathy, what you said, you also said in your story that you brought up a thought about quitting that I think a lot of what I call happy quitters share, which is that quitting isn't the negative absence of something. You are often quitting toward something. Like it's a positive motion towards progress. And we also often think of it as like an absence or a void that we're leaving behind, as opposed to a progression in our lives. So like same, and you just reflected that it's like choosing yourself, right? You were making a choice. You weren't just negating something in your life by doing that. So we're all here speaking in honor of International Women's Day. So I'd like to ask each of you, how has being a woman impacted your career, but particularly around your decisions to quit or not quit, job choices, career choices? Yeah. And anyone can start. I don't want to volunteer anyone, so yeah.
I'll start.
I can go.
For me, it was everything. And I'm sure many of these brilliant women have their own versions of it. I think for a lot of us. So for me, steeped in tech, I didn't see many women at certain levels, and the higher you got, the more promoted you got, the fewer women were there. Their ideas weren't welcome. We all know this. I could write a book and you'd all go, yep, I can write the same book. And I think for me, I just knew. And then getting pregnant, I got pregnant, and then everyone was like, congratulations. And my boss was like, oh no. Boss, oh no, you can't leave us. And then I remember my son came early, and I had surgery and all that stuff. And he called me, not to congratulate me. He called me the day after and said, well, I need you in Japan next week. And I remember in that moment going, I had a baby, not a football. So no, I will not be on a plane to Japan next week. I am literally stitched together, right, ladies? It was like, nope, this is not happening. And I in that moment, it was like so crystal clear. It wasn't even a hesitation. It was like, I'm done. And it was like joy. It wasn't even, I quit, slam the door, fantasy of, take this job and shove it. It was just so crystal clear that the next chapter of my life had begun. And that was it. That was the sign I needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Yvonne, tell us about how being a woman impacted your career decisions, including to quit or not to quit.
Oh yeah. So I was doing 80-hour weeks with a newborn baby in a new city by myself. My partner at the time hadn't come. So that was my life. And I was like, I am basically, this baby is living at the daycare, and I'm on call, and I stay overnight on call, and someone has to watch the baby while I'm on call. And then when I come back driving home at 8 a.m. in the morning, back home, then I have to pick up the baby and then be with the baby all day. So that was my life. So I would be on call overnight, then go get the baby, and then be with the baby during the day. So when am I sleeping? Like, when's that happening? So I was like, oh, I'm in the hospital taking care of other people's kids, and my child I'm not seeing, and I'm giving the baby my leftovers, and I'm exhausted. And I remember one day I was driving to pick up the baby, and I was post call, and I was I don't know what happened. I don't know if I wasn't driving well, but anyway, I thought I was awake, but then I got pulled over. And as soon as I got pulled over and the police officer started talking to me, I just completely lost it. To this day, I don't remember what we talked about. I was just crying so hard. I got a ticket. I was so upset. And like, that was all I remembered. But for me, that was a turning point, because I was like, I'm a zombie. I am just moving through life, not seeing my kids, my kid. And I'm trying to help other people's kids, but I didn't feel like I was making a difference there anyway, because you're only spending 8 to 10 minutes with the patient. So it was just kind of this like weird, like, this is not what I signed up for. Like, I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. And I feel like I'm just like this disembodied, body just moving through time. And so for me, being a mom was a huge reason why I left, because I wanted to be a present mom. I wanted to be a good example for my kids, and I just felt like if I continued at that pace, that they wouldn't have a mom to come to. I really felt like if I continued, I probably would have taken my life or something. It just felt like my life wasn't worth living. Yeah. So I feel like my kids kind of saved my life. So being a woman was a really important reason why I quit. I think probably the most important reason why I quit.
Yeah. Let's go to Beth, and then I have a particular twist in the question for Christina, actually. So Beth, yeah, how did being a woman impact your decisions to quit?
I agree with everybody that it was a big part of the decision. And when I quit Deloitte, we were in a high potential development program that one of the benefits of this program was you got to talk to a lot of different partners, principals, and directors and kind of learn from them. And I still to this day remember one woman who I really respected saying something to the effect of like, because I wasn't a mom yet, but my husband and I were kind of thinking about it. And she said something to the effect of, there are some days when I'm a really great mom and a bad worker, and there are other days where I'm like a really good worker and a bad mom. And I remember thinking like, it shouldn't have to be like that. Like, no, I don't want to be, I definitely don't want to be a bad mom. And I really don't want to be a bad worker either. And so I remember just kind of being struck by that. And, and I also knew women in consulting. I had a number of friends in our firm confide in me about multiple miscarriages and the struggles that they were having and how they kind of similar to Kathy, like, they just suffered a miscarriage and then their bosses on the phone wondering like why they aren't with it and like coming to work and, they're not fully, they don't feel comfortable disclosing like what's going on. And so that was definitely part of it. And it continues to be like, I'm actually expecting my third right now. And it's still this balance of like, for someone with me, having a disability, it presents additional challenges. We're like, I even know moms who are working, whether it was at Deloitte or the think tank I was at, or even now in higher ed, where, moms make it work. They might stay up late and work when the baby's asleep, but having a disability that's exacerbated by lack of sleep and stress, like that's not an option for me. So it's still something that I'm balancing, kind of throughout my life. And if I wasn't a woman, if I wasn't like physically involved in the creation of a whole person at the moment, like, it would be a different calculus. And I think it's something that, even for women who aren't mothers, we have this expectation of nurturing and being there and being counted on, that when all of a sudden we decide, nope, that's it, I'm done, there's a lot more blowback, I think, than our male counterparts may have to deal with.
Yeah. So Christina, I know you are a new mom. Congratulations. Oh, and Beth, congratulations to you too. But Christina, I know until you and I talked with each other for the book, you did not consider yourself a quitter. But in our conversation, we came to realize you had quit things. Like you quit college, you quit placating your mom, you quit some other things in your life, even if you didn't use the language of quit. How has being a woman impacted, your decisions in life to quit or not to quit?
So I relate a lot to Beth and her answer to this, because I was in an executive position when my husband and I were trying, and it took 2 years and 2 miscarriages to realize the stress of being responsible for that many people and their careers, and going to the higher level executive team on a weekly basis was just too much. It was just, stress is an incredible thing. It's like a disease almost. So I think becoming pregnant with my son, I quit that executorship, and it was the best decision I ever made, because it was just a few months later that I got pregnant with him. And now it's like, it's the funniest thing, after having all that responsibility, being a mom and just doing like, it's a directorship now, it's great, but like, it feels like a fraction of the work, even with having a child. It feels like I'm just not busy anymore. But I really feel like I have the time to be present with him and be a good mom. On the trapeze side of things, however, there was only 2 females in all 27 shows at Cirque du Soleil at the time. So if anything, being a woman prevented me from quitting, because I felt like it was winning the lottery to be in that position, and quitting was not a good thing because of, you know, whatever conception that we have in a negative manner. But I ultimately ended up giving the position to another really amazing woman who later became a mom as well, and she continued in flying trapeze at Cirque du Soleil. So I think being a woman has been an amazing thing, because I never envisioned being able to do all the things, and it makes me feel very empowered, because I literally feel like I can do all the things now. And I'm lucky that I was able to quit. I was unlucky that I was able to quit, because I'm a lot happier in the position I'm in now.
Got it. That's so interesting, that the falsely created sense of scarcity, like, oh, I'm one of only 2 women, therefore I need to stay, you know, can really trip ourselves up, you know. That's really interesting. And but for my part, you know, I think I'm the only non-child haver on the panel. And definitely being a woman was like, I often say that I never was made to feel othered until I joined the workforce. And 3 months in, I got sexually harassed. And that only happened because I'm a woman, right? And so so there's definitely things like that we all put up with. And that very much led to my first big significant quit, and changed my tune around quitting, for sure. And there's other things, like, even though I always knew I wasn't going to have children, you know, when I was in corporate, I felt the need to tell project managers that I'm not planning on having a child. So I was worried that they would not put me on their project if they thought I might get pregnant in the next year, you know? And so there's this little nonsense things like that we all have to deal with when we're women, you know, to kind of meet or defy people's horrible expectations or assumptions around us in the workplace. Thank you all for sharing that. I think that's super valuable. I'd love to ask about misconceptions. So when you have shared your quitting stories, maybe in particular your stories of quitting your professions and your careers, what misconceptions have people had about you or about that, you know, when you've shared those stories? Yeah, Yvonne, I can see you smiling, so I want to go to you first.
A couple of things. If for those of you who can't see me, I'm also a woman of color. So like, there's the sense that I couldn't hack it, that I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't, you know, good enough. And so that was something that came up for me a lot. Like, and then so I tried not to do this, but like, I did have to occasionally say, you know, like, I was a badass in med school and residency. I mean, like, I had all the grades, I had my own organization that I had while I was in med school. I had my own HIV outreach organization. I was a Schweitzer fellow. Did all the things, everything, the check marks, I did everything. Right. So like this whole idea that I couldn't hack it, like, oh, you were just not smart enough, or, you know, that sense that brings on this sense of that not enoughness that we call shame, right? And so I even got it from my family, honestly, because they were like, "What is wrong with you? You've always been the trailblazer, right? What is this little thing that you just can't do?" And they just could not understand that this was not about not being able to hack it. This was about being completely out of alignment with the ideals, the values that I hold dear, right? Wanting to be of service, wanting to be connected, wanting to be fully authentic in my life. And I just couldn't reconcile being this zombie with being the authentic, vibrant, you know, multi-passionate person that I knew myself to be. And I knew that if I stayed there, I would internally die. I could already see the light going out for me. I was already like this, like a shadow of myself. But people for a long time, it took me about a decade to like explain myself. Like, and after a while I stopped explaining myself, but like for a while there, I kept having to explain myself that no, I was enough. I just chose, this was my choice. It wasn't because I got kicked out or, you know, I chose this.
Yeah, I think right now I'm just realizing this in the moment, we have a really strong collection here of people who were excelling in their chosen professions at the time they chose to quit. Like, we're at the top of their game, you know, and if anything should dispel the myth that quitting is failure, or that people only quit when the going gets tough, you know, I think all of you are just poster children, poster women for that being nonsense. So, anyone else have anything else to say about the misconceptions they encountered when they told people they quit?
Yeah, I'm nodding my head radically, Yvonne, because I so understand where you're coming from. So yeah, similarly, like, you know, you go to this top business school. You know, I was a vice president at the time. There were very few women in the company I was at. Then I was up for a senior vice president role. Like it was like I lived and breathed and worked, you know, worked. And then in the evenings, comedy. And I couldn't reconcile the two Kathys. I kept trying to bring more of that in. It was like, that's not welcome here. And the interesting thing is the misconception is the people around you, you know, you come from certain circles. You've all gone to like top business schools together. You've all gone through top, you know, medical schools, you know, for Yvonne, all of us. And they're like, why can't you just, why? And like, I think a lot of my friends were like, why can't you just be happy? You're making money, good money, you're up for a promotion. Why can't you just live your little Silicon Valley life and be happy? And it was really hard for them to understand. So I think the misconception is that you know, you need all these trappings, and why can't you just settle in? Like, what is, you're just, you know, there's something maybe in you. And it's like, yes, because the values you have and what you want for your life isn't where you're at. It's just not where I'm at. And I was never going to be able to be fully me where I was at. But it is interesting how the people around you, sometimes if you give them too much of a say, can also contribute to you sometimes feeling stuck. And I've seen that happen. And believe me, I got an earful from a lot of my friends that were like, are you sure? Are you sure? Do you really want to leave that good job? And it's like, it's yes. So I think that can sometimes keep people trapped in a little bit of a bubble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that speaks to definitely something that comes up in the book is, are you going to live your life based on other people's fears that they have for themselves, or your own fears? Maybe you don't even have those fears, actually. Yeah. I'm really about those people were concerned about their lives when they were questioning yours, you know? Yeah. Beth or Christina, anything to share about the misconceptions you've encountered along the way?
Yes, I will say, in all honesty, I go by a pseudonym in the book, so I can't even say that I'm fully comfortable stating that
I forgot about that until I reread the story last night, and I was like, oh,
yeah, who's Genevieve? My confirmation name. I kind of say that, you know, somewhat seriously. I work as a career counselor, and so, like, you know, it's hard for me to come out, like, I don't know that I would come out to my students and be like, oh yeah, I quit this job. That's, by the way, a job that like tons of you are trying to apply for. And I just said, no, thanks. But the other thing is, I think a misconception was kind of to Yvonne's point of like not trying hard enough. At a later job, I remember being at this point where like I had a 9-month-old, I was experiencing postpartum depression. I just had a major seizure. And so I was in what's called a post-ictal phase where like I was having memory issues. I couldn't speak clearly. And this lasts for, you know, in some cases, weeks or months. And I was, you know, having a bad time. And I had a manager say to me, and this was a manager who knew everything that was going on. And she's like, well, I just think you need to work on resilience. And I almost punched her across the room. Because it was this moment of like, if you were facing even one of the things I'm facing in my life right now, I can guarantee you'd be flat on your butt. And that was kind of a clue for me that like it was maybe time to start searching for something else. So I think that whole idea of like, why aren't you trying harder? Or what aren't you doing? Or especially now in corporate world, like there's all these like, well, let's give you a mindfulness app and let's give you like workout time and that will help you. And it's like, no, that's not it. Like, don't give me resilience training when I really just need you to not email me at 2:00 in the morning and expect me to respond.
Yeah.
Like,
Beth, that is so apt, because I in last fall, I was part of a virtual conversation, and a woman in it said something I has been sticking in my heart and my head ever since, where this topic of resilience came up, right? And she said, I shouldn't have to be resilient to work at your company. and that's so true. It's like, it totally, like, yes, it's going to be resilient, but why are we requiring that of people to do a good job? Right? It's so messed up, like, you shouldn't have to be resilient. I hope people say that again and again to their bosses, to their leaders, like, if I have to have resilience just to get my job done, that's your fault, not my fault. Like, you are doing something wrong in the culture of this workplace. Christina, any misconceptions you've encountered?
Yeah, I think the big one pertaining to back in the circus days was that I was giving up because there was just nowhere further to go. Or that, that I was old, or that I was hurting, or that I was weak. Very similar to some of the other stories we've heard. So I think coming out of that and proving that I could be stronger in an intellectual instead of just physical way was really what helped me persevere through that, and kind of, be able to look my leaders from Cirque du Soleil in the eye and be like, oh, okay, how's that going for you now? Like, judgment.
Nice. Great. Let's talk about leadership now. Given the audience that we're speaking to, I'd love for each of you to comment on, what do you think quitting has to do with leadership, and specifically with female leadership?
No, I'll jump in. I'll take a stab. It's a great question. Oh my gosh. I've been thinking about this topic a lot, especially in light of world events, and we see the balance and things out of alignment, because we see what happens when female leadership is missing, across the globe. And I think women lead with a lot more collaborative narratives. And, we need both. We need a balance of, the masculine and the feminine. And so it's not an either or, but you can see what happens when we're out of alignment. And I do believe that female leaders tend to, yes, there's exceptions, but they tend to collaborate and build a narrative where everybody wins. And we see what happens with competitive narratives. And I think Silicon Valley, my story, was completely about competitive narratives. For somebody to win, somebody else had to lose. And that creates, just an awful systemic issue for so many. And I think in quitting, you're choosing a story and a narrative for yourself, as well as, you're considering all these other factors. What about, work? Christina talks about not wanting to let other women down who are there. We're more likely to consider our actions on everybody else. I think that's a wonderful, beautiful thing. And yes, and we also need to remember the responsibility to ourselves. So I think it's a perfect example of all these different things that happen in our decisions to quit, how we are so cognizant of a collaborative narrative, and trying to leave. When we do leave, we're trying to not burn the house down.
Some of us.
Know that house should be burned down to the ground.
Some of us 10 years later still want to go with like a can of oil and a match.
Yeah. Like, I am a benevolent arsonist. Like, I want to burn some shiz to the ground, but I want to like evacuate the building first, because I'm not a bad person. But yeah. And I think it's so true of women to want to create. We want to leave everybody better off, and we just our stories tend to consider a lot of perspectives. And I think that's just classic kind of female leadership. But I love that. I think the world needs more of that collaborative narrative kind of thing.
That's interesting. You're drawing the connection between quitting and collaboration, and I think Christina, for you too, I mean, I'm going to judge you and say you quitting Cirque du Soleil, a big part of it was that you knew that they would be okay, that you weren't going to leave anyone in the lurch, right? And I think that's being a leader. You know, like, yeah. Do you want to comment a bit more about that on quitting in leadership?
I think it was my ultimate goal and I had achieved it and it kind of made it my baby, even though at that time I didn't have a baby. So leaving the position, the show was still going to be my baby. I wanted to make sure that the position was filled and filled with someone who felt ready. And I stayed longer to make sure that she felt ready. And I'm really grateful for that. I mean, Kathy, I couldn't agree with you more in all the things that you're saying. I think women have a lot, and I don't know if it's just that nurture part in us, but we have a lot of ability to find win-win situations.
Got it.
Yeah, I think about women's leadership kind of from the perspective of like the two things that came out. Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, which admittedly I have not read because I don't want to read it because I kind of don't read. Because she's living by these male values that have been set up as success. But then like on the opposite hand, we have someone like Anne-Marie Slaughter who said like, yeah, women can't have it all. But that's okay. Or like we try our best. And I had a chance to meet her once and I at a panel and I went up and I was just like, thank you for like giving voice to other working moms who are trying to do everything and our plates are dropping all over the place and just saying it's okay. And it's okay to quit. And like, she had a pretty, pardon me, badass job that she was like, I can't do this anymore. And so for me, I think I also relate it to, what example am I setting, not just for my children, but also the students that I work with and trying to bring their authentic selves to whatever is that next step in the process. And, helping them recognize that like, just because there's this thing out there that says, this is what you must do to be successful. This is how much you have to make. This is the type of job that you should get. You don't have to buy into that. And I feel like I'm trying to help my students recognize that earlier so that they hopefully don't have to go through some of the stuff that I went through to recognize it for themselves.
Great. Yvonne, anything to add on quitting in leadership and female leadership?
Yeah. One of my favorite definitions of a leader is, I don't know, for some of you don't know this, but I facilitate a lot of Brene Brown's curricula, all of her work, and her Dare to Lead. In her Dare to Lead book and curriculum, she defines a leader as anyone at any level. So anyone at any level who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes and has the courage to develop that potential. So it's just anyone at any level who takes responsibility for finding that potential in people and processes and has the courage to develop that potential. And I think as most women, since we're not usually like, I think Kathy said that in the chat, we're not usually like the center. We're not usually like the ones in front charging, but we are leaders from wherever we are at any level, and so being able to have that courage, sometimes when you're in a system where that's not working and you're a leader and you quit, you're giving yourself the opportunity to find other places right? You're having that courage and you're giving yourself that opportunity to then find places where you can actually find that potential, develop that potential in people and processes. It doesn't have to be like up front. It doesn't have to be at the top of the pyramid, right? You don't have to be all the way out there. In most organizations, as far as I can see, it's usually women walking alongside in the middle, leading from the back, and making change that way. So I think in terms of leadership, starting to see ourselves as leaders, not just when we're in it, but having that courage to know when to leave so that we can find other places where we can develop those potentials in people and processes is important. And I think sometimes, and at least what I've seen in my work, coaching a lot of physician women, is that, you know, when some of them quit, or when some of them think about quitting, they feel like they've lost their whole identity as leaders. But no, you can still be a leader wherever you are. It's just that, you know, wherever you are you able to have the courage to develop that potential in the people and processes that are around you?
Great. Thank
Hopefully
you.
that made sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. I want to direct the next question first to Yvonne and Beth, because Yvonne, you know, both of you make careers out of giving people advice these days. You know, Yvonne, you counsel medical professionals who are thinking of quitting the field, and Beth, you give college students career advice nearly every single day. So I'd love to ask each of you, you know, what advice would you give to a woman trying to decide to quit a job or not right now? We'll start with Yvonne. So I'm not sure if Beth is with us.
Sure. Okay. So I think the thing I always tell them is you don't have to blow up your whole life. Like I did. I just kind of I was like, you know, F this, I'm out of here. And, you know, just pretty much just destroyed everything. And I had to rebuild. And so one of the things I found myself doing the most with women who want to quit is, you know, how can you quit in a way that supports you? How can you quit in a way that leaves your dignity intact, right? You know, the thing about burnout, or the thing about being in a place where you've reached the end of your rope, or like there's no way out. There's no way but quit. That's it. That's the only thing you can think about. The thing about that is that sometimes we make decisions that are not the most supportive of us. We burn bridges. We just put ourselves in holes that take us years to dig out of, right? But be very intentional about your quitting. At least now some people can go and jump off the bridge, you know, jump off the cliff and leap and the net will fall. I mean, catch you, yes. But in most cases, like a lot of women are moms and they're breadwinners, and they have bridges that they've spent time building. You don't just you know, say F this and blow everything up. The person who will burn is you. So how can I quit in a way that is intentional, right? How can I create a safe place for myself as I'm quitting? How can I quit in a way that's in alignment with my values, right? So if connection is important to you, you know, are you quitting in a way that completely disconnects you, right? Either from the people you were working with or the things that are important to you, right? So learning how to quit intentionally in a way that there's a way to do it in a way that supports you, and there's a way to do it that completely destroys you. If you just jump and just quit and just burn everything, then you'll be the one now having to recover from that and having to go back and, you know, and that's really, really hard. So that's always a thing that I try to focus on. How can you quit in a way that supports you? How can you quit intentionally in alignment with your values?
Yeah. Beth, I'm not sure if you heard the question, but I wanted specifically you and Yvonne to answer. If a woman came to you today asking for your advice on deciding to quit a job or not, what advice would you give her?
That's a really good question. And I think I would encourage her to look at all the different aspects. So not just work, but what's going on with you physically, mentally, spiritually, with your family life. And, you know, take some time to think about, you know, the benefits and the negatives of quitting within all those areas. And also being, I'll say, politically savvy. So, you know, kind of to Yvonne's point about doing it in a correct way, yeah, there are totally times when I wanted to quit and just give them the middle finger and walk around and walk away. But, you know, thinking about, okay, well, how can I do this so that one, I'm maybe helping others along the way. Maybe are there people I can pull up in doing this? Or if I am trying to leading change, lasting change, or if I'm trying to make a statement with quitting, you know, how can I do that? And I think, you know, when I left Deloitte, I had been there for 5.5 years and I had tried a lot. I had tried different flexibility options the firm had given me. I tried working with lots of different styles of leadership. And I understood that I was getting to a point in the firm where what was going to be expected of me to get to the next level just wasn't gelling with who I was. So when I went in to have that very awkward conversation that I was leaving, you know, the managing director, who wasn't thrilled I was leaving, understood why, and, you know, wasn't pushing back. And it was an uncomfortable conversation, but I still think it was one of the better professional conversations I had, because when I finally said, I will need you to guarantee me a 40-hour work week, he just sighed and looked so down, and he's like, that's the one thing I can't give you. And I'm like, I know, which is why I'm leaving. And I think just having courage too, and making sure that, like, I would also say making sure that you do have the support in place for when you quit. And I'm not talking like necessarily having another job to jump to, but just knowing that you have that support, whatever your village looks like, whether it's a partner or friends or parents, but like, having, I'll say, an escape plan of sorts, so that, you can be surrounded by people who will be supportive of your decision and will help you. And especially if you're in, there are situations where sometimes you just have to get out of a situation fast. So, understanding like who are those people that you can turn to if you just got to pick up and leave, and knowing what that is.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Beth. So we're at the 10-minute mark. And before I ask the final question of our panelists, which will be a really quick one-word response, I want to invite everyone who's watching and listening to, if you have any questions for our panelists, please put them in the chat right now. Also, panelists, if you have anything you'd like to promote or share with people, any links, how people can find you, how people can learn more about your work, please drop that in the chat at this moment as well. But my final question for all of you is, what is one word that you wish people associated with quitting that they currently don't? One word you wish quitting was associated with. And I'll let you facilitate yourselves on who wants to go first, second, third, and fourth.
I have one.
Okay.
I have to actually go head out to get to a bus stop. Brave.
Right.
For me, it's driven.
And for me, it's alignment.
This is more of a phrase.
Sure, I'll allow it.
Think of it. I'd say yes and yourself. Yes and yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. We'll open up for questions now, but just in case you run out of time, I want to just thank our panelists. It's been so wonderful to be in community with the four of you in one place. And I do know Beth had to leave early to attend to something. But Kathy, Yvonne, and Christina, thank you so much for making the time, and happy International Women's Day week. And let's go to questions. So Brandy, I believe you were gonna throw us some questions if any came up in the chat. Yeah.
Yes. Now, Mary Anna, she's the one that actually wanted to share her story, and she just posted a moment ago that she had to leave the meeting early, but she wanted you guys to know that this was a phenomenal meeting, and she looks forward to future events. Let's see, we've got one question here. She says, I'm curious to know how to encourage others in your life to quit. So that's a great question.
Yeah. I can start with one part of the reframe that I hope people get from the book, which is, unlike how Kathy's leaders responded to her quitting, I would recommend that our impulses should change from the no or why to the congratulations. I really like to see that shift. So I think that in itself can be encouraging to others. To kind of have faith and trust in them making the best decisions for themselves that they know how to make in that moment. Yvonne, Christina, Kathy, how would you like to encourage others in your life?
I would just encourage them to read your book.
Oh.
I think for me, I would actually, everyone's on their journey. So like in terms of encouraging people to quit, I don't know, it's like people will quit when they get there, so encouraging someone to quit, I have mixed feelings about it. I think it's about walking alongside someone and helping them get clear about why it is that they want to quit, and maybe being a support for them when they do decide to quit. But I always believe in letting people's journeys unfold as they need to unfold, and just being a strong, supportive, loving presence. Because if you encourage someone to quit before they're ready, it could just blow up in your face. So being able to just be this loving presence, you know, be empathetic if they're having a hard time, this is hard. You can mirror back. This is hard. I'm here for you. Let me know what you need. Kind of like in that space, as opposed to like, poking and prodding for someone to quit. So yeah, that's my feeling on it. That makes any sense. But it's a great question.
Yeah, support, agreed, support. I mean, hopefully it shouldn't get to the point where somebody's ready to quit and all of a sudden, the leadership in your organization is like, what can we do differently? Because usually by then it's too late. so I think the message too is for people to have those conversations, and I know it takes a little bit of some courage, and that's okay. Have the be bold, be brave, and if it's meant to be, and it's something that can be fixed, leaders also on the other end of that engage that, treat it seriously, be of support, and see if it's possible. And if nothing is possible and it's the right thing to do, and sometimes it just is, then the question to really ask is, how can I support you? What do you need from me to make this successful? How do I make it a successful transition? What can I do personally to make this easier for you? And I think it's really facilitating that transition and recognizing the courage it takes for somebody to reach that point.
Oh, thank you so much. That was awesome. We've got time for one more question, and this is a good one. I really like this. What self-care practices do you guys recommend for someone who is at that point? They're ready to quit. How do we take care of ourselves?
I'm more of a head person than a body and heart person. So I'll just quickly say quitting is self-care, and I'll leave it at that. And I'll leave the rest of the time up to the panelists to answer that question.
I'm happy to volunteer because self-care is something that, sorry, it got really windy. Something that I've had to do to survive, really. And I think for me, it's been being countercultural and I've talked to bosses up front with new jobs about saying, no, I will not answer calls after a certain point. I will not check email on the weekend. And when I'm interviewing, it's like, hey, if this is not going to jive with your culture, that's cool. Let's just do this, understand this now. So I'm not going to disappoint anybody. And then making time for exercise, even if it's just walking around outside. I think there's something about being outside and the fresh air and the endorphins that, especially if you're in a really stressful situation and you're ready to quit, the endorphins can sometimes just help kind of bring the temperature down a little bit, even if momentarily.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I echo everything she said. I think for me, the two most important, in addition to exercise, the two most important practices, number one is meditation. Meditation really helps you get clear about, where you are, why you're doing what you're doing, just really giving yourself the silence and the stillness that it takes to hear yourself. And then the other practice that I like to play with is morning pages, which is just 3 pages. Some people can do 1 page, but 3 pages of just free writing. When you're going through the chaos and trauma of burnout, or you're on the edge of quitting, it's important to be able to have that quiet to hear yourself. And then also when you're writing out your thoughts, then you can see what's going on with you on the inside. Why do I feel like quitting? What's going on? Who's pissing me off? Or what am I frustrated about? Right? Being able to see all of that on paper then helps you know what kind of right action to then take. But if you're not listening to yourself, if you're not, spending that time in stillness and silence, then it's just so noisy. Right. So those are the 2 things that I always recommend. I really believe in.
I'd say really simple. Those are all great. I'd say find the place that makes you so happy that you're in your joyful space, so that you know who you are in that joyful space. You know the best of who you are. So when you go back to work, you see the difference and you know what's possible for yourself. And for me, comedy was that place. The comedy stage is that place. So I knew me at my best, and I had that soft space to land. And because I had that freedom, I knew what happy Kathy looked like and like, Kathy in his face looked like. And it was important for me because I could get very clear at my best, my potential, what it felt like to be at my best. I think that's really important. So find that place where you flourish.
Christina,
Thank you
any
so
thoughts on
much.
self-care? Yeah.
Yeah, this has been such a phenomenal event. I mean, a huge shout out to Kanor Bahal for doing such a phenomenal job moderating the session and for bringing such a talented panel to us. Thank you so much. We are extremely grateful. Thank you for being here with us, panelists. To our attendees, thank you so much for being here as well. Be sure to tune in later this week. We have more exciting events coming up this month. On Friday, we have another panel coming up where we are going to have several incredible women who are going to share their stories of courage. And then next week, we are going to have a community chat that is going to focus on mastering self-confidence. So be sure to head over to our CWL website where you can register for this and all of our upcoming events. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Eleanor.
Bye.
Thank you all. Goodbye.